So up to this point, I've been talking about natural selection for things like traits like hair color or limbs or chin dents, things like that. But I do want to talk briefly about the fact that natural selection can also evolve complex traits. So we're going to talk a little bit things like eyes and wings, which are more complex than something like a chin dimple, and behaviors, because we actually have found that behaviors are evolved and can be passed down through generations. So I'm going to start first with behavior. So this is a experiment that was done with rats, as you can probably guess from the picture. This experiment was done in 1954, and they trained a group of rats to run through a maze. Most of the experiments we've done have been done like that. And there was a variation in the ability of the rats to do this. They were basically looking to see how many errors the rats made when they ran the maze. And so then what the researcher did is he pulled them apart into two groups. He took the rats that had, more errors, and what he called slow learners, and put them in one group, and then put the fast learners in the other group, and then selectively bred them. So only allowed fast learning rats to breed with fast learning rats and slow learning rats to breed with slow learning rats. Because he wanted to know, could something like a behavior like learning to run a maze be genetic? Could it be passed on? And so he did that. He bred the fast learners with the fast learners, the slow learners with the slow learners, and basically was then making, lines of these two rats. And what he saw, as you can probably see from the graph, is a very interesting result. So what happened in his experiment? Because he ran it for 6 generations. So each generation he ran through the maze. And so what happened after 6 generations? Yeah, the slow learning rats made more and more and more errors with each generation. So each generation got worse at running the maze. And the fast learning rats got better and better and better and better at running the maze. The thing is, we still, after this was done in the 50s, so still to this day, we're not clear on which genes, so what sets of directions are tied to maze running behavior. But this is a very strong indicator that there is a genetic component to maze running behavior in rats. And there are other experiments out there that have been done to show behavior is something that is passed down. So behavior is something that natural selection can act on. Now, the other thing is structures. So as far as complex structures, like I said, something like a dent and a chin isn't very complex, but something like an eye or a wing on like an insect or a bird are pretty complex structures. And so how can one of these evolve if only 1% or 5% of a wing doesn't allow the organism to fly? Well, thing is that some researchers were kind of curious about this too. So how can natural selection end up creating something like a wing? Well, the thing is that the wing didn't start as a wing. The thing is that the structures start as something else, and then eventually over time get mutated until the point that they change into something that is beneficial in another way. So on some insects, there are these little nubs. And these little nubs like wing nubs, they don't have any flying ability. They don't have gliding ability, right? They can't do anything for the insect as far as that goes. But what it does do for the insect is it allows them to partially regulate their temperature. And so it actually allows them to regulate their temperature, and the bigger that these little nubs are, so you can see here the wing size, right? So down here they're just little nubs, but the bigger that those are, so that we're going wing size this way, the more benefit they get to regulating their body temperature. And so the bigger the nubs get, until you get to a point right here, the better they are at helping them with temperature control. Now there's a point at which that benefit levels out. But at that point, these nubs, when they get a little bit bigger, actually now work to glide. And so insects with these size wing nubs actually can climb up and then jump, and those nubs will help them glide down so they don't just crash into the forest floor or something. And so the bigger the nubs get from here, the more and more gliding ability they get until they get to the point where they can use them to fly. And so this is one of the ways that we are pretty sure. Now, we don't have the evidence, you know, the fossil evidence of this, but this is an indicator of how this could work to create these structures. Now, as far as eyes, I've got this question for you, so I want you to answer this question and then I'll talk about it. So these are the three down here: eye spots to sense light, pinhole camera eye for shape discrimination, so telling what a shape is, and then eye cups to sense the direction of light. So those are the three types of primitive eyes. Which of the orders that are listed here puts the step of eye evolution in the best order? And it's going to be 3, right? Thing is that in order for B or C to work, A has to come first. You have to be able to sense light. And thing is that this is actually the first structure we see show up in organisms that are what we would consider basic type organisms. Single cell organisms like Euglena, which we'll see later in the semester, have eye spots, the ability to sense the presence of light. Then the next thing is to be able to tell where the light's coming from. And so that's why C is the next best option in the order. And when we look at the evolutionary tree, that's the next structure that we see. So eye cups are going to be found in things like flatworms, so they can tell not just that there is light, but which way it's coming from. So that way they can tell, you know, okay, I want to go towards the light, or no, I want to run away from the light, or, ooh, something moved over the light, I should, you know, do something about that. And then B, you need the ability of the other two in order to do the shape discrimination. And then you get the pinhole camera, and that is our pupil, right? And that's actually the next one you see show up in the evolutionary order, the pupil with no lens, and then putting things like a lens over top of it for more focusing. So, all right. So the next video, we'll pick up with the evidence for evolution.